Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The doorbell was broken. Of course it was. After everything I did to make this day perfect, the universe still found a way to ruin the timing. I stood there, holding a tray of appetizers I didn't even like, watching guests knock on the door, then peek through the window like raccoons looking for scraps. I should have fixed that stupid bell 3 weeks ago, when Callie reminded me. She always reminded me of things she never intended to do herself. It was her birthday, her big birthday, the one she started planning 6 months ago, right around the time she stopped talking to me during dinner and started sleeping in fleece pajamas that made her look like a cartoon bear. I thought maybe if I just showed up this year, did the effort, played the part of the supportive husband like she used to beg me to, maybe then she'd notice I was still here, still trying. But the second the door opened and I saw her walk in, with him, I knew I'd lost something I hadn't even realized I was competing for. He wasn't handsome in the obvious way. He was confident, relaxed, too relaxed, like someone who wasn't nervous about being seen. Callie walked in beside him like she was stepping into her own personal rom-com. Not a house filled with neighbors, friends, and a husband holding food with shaking hands. She didn't look at me, not right away. She made her entrance, let the crowd swallow her. Laughed like she was 22 again. People clapped, someone popped a confetti cannon, and I just stood there, stuck in the middle of the living room, completely invisible in my own house. I didn't say anything for the first hour. I handed out drinks, smiled at coworkers I didn't know, took a picture of her pretending to blow out candles even though she didn't. I even helped that guy. I later learned his name was Miles. Find the bathroom. Then she came up to me, grinning like she'd just won something, and she said, "Why do you look so thoughtful tonight? Not, are you okay? Not, thanks for throwing this. Not even, do you want to talk?" Just that sweet, syrupy tone that she saves for customer service or strangers she wants to impress. I looked her straight in the eye and replied, loud enough to pierce through the music and the laughter, "I'm just wondering how you had the nerve to invite your lover to your birthday party." Her face dropped like the floor vanished beneath her. The air went thin. You ever feel 30 people freeze all at once? That's what it felt like. The clinking of glasses stopped. The guy holding the charcuterie plate froze mid-chew. Even the candles seemed to flicker harder. And Callie? She didn't say a word. She just blinked, like she hadn't decided which lie to go with yet. That's when I realized something that would haunt me later. She wasn't scared that I said it. She was scared because she knew I wasn't done. I didn't flinch. I didn't stutter. And still, after I said it, after those exact words left my mouth and cut through the buzz of the party like a rusty blade, I immediately regretted how calm I sounded. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, preferably a glass, maybe a bottle. But instead, I stood there with my jaw locked and my hands still awkwardly cupped around a paper plate of mini quiches like I was a waiter at a party I wasn't invited to. People were still processing what I'd said. You could feel the tension spiral. One guy coughed. Another lady grabbed her wine glass a little too fast and spilled some on the rug. But no one spoke. They all looked at her, not me. Like she was the one in danger. Like I had ruined the mood. And maybe I had. But I didn't care. Not anymore. Callie's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted toward Miles. Yes, Miles. The guy who earlier had the audacity to compliment the color of her dress like it wasn't clinging to her like his scent. He looked like he wanted to crawl into the fruit bowl and disappear. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, and I swear her voice cracked halfway through. "He's just a friend. A coworker." "Oh," I replied. "The kind of coworker who texts you at 1 a.m.? Sends you flowers addressed to your middle name? The kind of coworker you whisper about when you think I'm asleep?" My voice stayed even. Scared me a little how steady it came out. I wasn't performing. I was finally done pretending. Someone gasped. I didn't turn to see who. It didn't matter anymore. "You read my phone?" she snapped, shifting from fake confused to faux outraged in under 5 seconds. Classic Callie, when in doubt, deflect. Suddenly I was the villain. Not her. Not Miles, who by now had taken 2 steps back and was conveniently fascinated by the shrimp cocktail tray. "I didn't have to," I said. "Your phone reads like a romance novel with bad punctuation." That's when her mother, who had flown in from Arizona for the weekend, stood up with a plate in one hand and a trembling glass in the other. "Maybe this isn't the time," she whispered, like I just brought up taxes at a funeral. "No," I said louder this time, "it's exactly the time, because I've waited for months. While she worked late, while she stayed over at Dana's, while I sat home folding her laundry and wondering if I was just going crazy. And it turns out I wasn't. I was just married to a woman who invited her affair partner to her birthday and hoped I'd smile through it." Callie looked stunned. Not sad, not sorry, just stunned, as if I'd broken the script she was writing in her head. The one where she got to play innocent a little longer. The one where I stayed the soft-spoken pushover, too timid to call her out. And then, just as the silence began to rebuild itself, someone clinked a fork to a glass. Ting, ting, ting. And I swear to you, in the most surreal moment of my life, Callie's boss, who apparently hadn't caught the full drama, raised his wine and said, "To Callie, the most radiant woman in the room." There was no applause, no laughter, just tension so thick you could taste it. Callie didn't smile this time, and I put the plate down, adjusted my jacket and said, "You might want to open your gift now." She looked confused. "What gift?" "The one in the kitchen," I said. "I left it next to the wine cooler." She walked off quickly, heels clicking on the hardwood. People began whispering, some slipping toward the door. Miles had vanished, probably through the back. She came back holding a small blue box with a ribbon, looked around the room, and opened it. Inside, a flash drive, and a note that read, "Watch this when you're alone." I already did. Her hands started to shake, and that's when I walked out. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't flip a table or scream obscenities into the air. I walked, slowly, deliberately, past the string lights, past the fake gold happy birthday banner she picked out last week, past the neighbor who avoided my gaze as he clutched a plate of meatballs like it was a shield. The night air outside was still warm, but I felt cold, numb, maybe. And not because I was heartbroken. I wasn't. I was clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, the fog had lifted. I saw her exactly as she was. Not as I remembered her. Not as I hoped she could still be. I sat in my car, not turning the engine on yet. I just sat there, staring at the windshield while the inside of the house erupted into quiet chaos behind me. Through the living room window, I could see the guests pretending everything was fine. Someone restarted the music, and a woman with red hair laughed nervously. Too loud. Classic party damage control. They didn't know what was on that flash drive. But Callie did. I'd found the folder by accident 2 weeks earlier. It was labeled Meeting Notes, because of course it was. A dozen video files, some so grainy you'd think it was security footage. Most were recorded in hotel rooms. The audio was clear, though. Very clear. Her voice was unmistakable. So was his. I listened to everything. Watched everything. There were timestamps, dates, even affectionate nicknames. Cubicle Queen and Mr. Mondays. I couldn't make that up if I tried. First, I thought about confronting her right away. Maybe even throwing the laptop through the bedroom window. But then I realized, what for? So she could cry and say she felt neglected? So she could spin a monologue about how I stopped being romantic after we got married? I didn't want her explanations. I wanted her lies to collapse under their own weight. I wanted her to feel cornered without me even needing to lift a finger. And now she was trapped, publicly. No way to pretend it didn't happen. I didn't just expose her to the people who mattered. I exposed her to herself. My phone buzzed. I didn't look at it right away. I knew it was her. Or maybe one of her friends, playing mediator. I eventually checked. 10 messages. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. The last text simply said, "Please don't do this. We can talk." Too late. I started the car. But I didn't go home. That place didn't feel like mine anymore. Not after what I saw on those videos. Not after hearing her laugh in ways I hadn't heard since before we were married. And not with me. Instead, I drove 2 towns over to a cheap motel I had booked earlier that day. I had packed a small bag just in case. I don't know why I knew I'd need it, but part of me had made peace with leaving even before I made the toast that nuked her birthday. Inside the motel, the room smelled like old carpet and desperation. But it was quiet. And it was mine. I opened my laptop and rewatched the first video. Not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I wanted to feel it again. The finality. The moment I knew there was no repairing what we had. In the video, she's sitting on a hotel bed, playing with her hair, smiling like she's 19 again. She looks happy, lighter, freer. And all I could think was I really the thing holding her down all this time? Had she been waiting for a reason to escape? Then Miles walks into frame. She throws a pillow at him and says, "Don't be late next time or I'll tell my husband you're my therapist." They both laugh. That's when I closed the laptop. No more watching. No more wondering. No more trying. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow. I just lay back on that lumpy motel bed, stared at the ceiling, and whispered to no one. She brought him into our lives. I just made sure he'd never be comfortable again. Because the flash drive? It wasn't the only copy. And this story? Far from over. The next morning felt like waking up in someone else's life. The motel curtains were thin enough that sunlight cut straight through and hit my eyes before I even opened them. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I turned my head, saw the beige wallpaper peeling near the AC unit, and remembered. This wasn't a bad dream. This was real. This was my new normal. I checked my phone. 32 new messages. 7 missed calls. A few voicemails I didn't bother opening. Most were from Callie. Couple from her sister. One from her coworker, Dana, the one she always swore was her go-to alibi. Dana's text read, "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened a new message thread, typed in my attorney's number, and wrote, "We need to meet today." Short, cold. Just like the way Callie had slowly started treating me over the last year. I had forgiven so many things before this. The distance. The apathy. The way she'd roll her eyes if I talked too long about work. I figured maybe we were just going through a rough patch. Every couple does, right? No, that's not what it was. This wasn't a patch. This was a quiet campaign to erase me from her life, one little insult at a time, one secret at a time, until I was just a background character she could push off-screen when she found someone with better lighting. When I walked out of that party, I left more than a marriage. I left years of begging for scraps of affection. I left the version of me that made excuses for her, who thought maybe she's just stressed or maybe I'm not doing enough. By noon, I'd already sent the backup files to 2 different locations. One to a secured email folder, and another to my brother, who didn't even know what I was sending him. Just that I told him to hold on to it, in case things get weird. They got weird fast. Around 3 p.m. Someone banged on the door to my motel room. Not knocked, banged. Like they wanted the door to give out. It was Callie. She was wearing the same dress from the party, but the makeup was smudged, and her eyes looked hollow. I didn't open the door all the way, just enough so she knew I was there. "Elwood," she started. And for the first time in a long time, she actually looked unsure of herself. Not angry, not manipulative, just unraveling. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't say anything. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she said, voice shaking. "It started as a stupid crush, and then it got complicated. I was going to end it. I tilted my head. "Before or after you brought him to your birthday?" She winced like I slapped her. "I thought if I could just prove to myself it wasn't serious." "Oh, so bringing him to the house you share with your husband was you testing your feelings?" "No, God, Elle, I was confused." "You weren't confused," I snapped. "You were careful. There's a difference." That shut her up. She stepped back slightly, like my words carried physical weight. I could see tears starting to form, but I didn't care. I had seen enough performances to last a lifetime. "I sent the videos to my lawyer. I said flatly. Her face went pale. Not to hurt you, I added. To protect myself. You don't get to ruin me quietly and walk away smiling. You're really going to ruin everything over this? I laughed. That bitter, hollow kind of laugh that doesn't sound right even to your own ears. Callie, you already ruined everything. I'm just making sure the credits roll. She didn't cry. I thought she might, but she didn't. She just stared at me for a few long seconds, then turned and walked back to her car without another word. Not even a goodbye. I didn't watch her leave. I closed the door and sat back on the edge of the bed, wondering how long it would take for her to start rewriting the story, to her family, to her friends, to the world. I knew she'd try to make herself the victim, but the truth had timestamps. The truth had voices and hotel curtains and whispered lies recorded in HD. And the truth was finally mine. 2 days passed. I stayed in that same motel room, watching the same 3 news channels loop the same stories while I let my coffee go cold. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't licking wounds. I was waiting for her next move, for the fallout to trickle through whatever world she'd built on top of lies. I imagined her at home, pacing in that spotless kitchen she never cooked in, trying to decide who to blame next, me, the guy she cheated with, maybe even the doorbell. But it didn't matter anymore. I had taken the one thing she'd always had over me: control. On the morning of the 3rd day, I received an email. Not a text, not a call. An actual email from Callie. The subject line read, "If you're still reading these." I clicked it. Inside was a long letter. Too long. The kind of apology that feels written for a courtroom, not a husband. She talked about how lost she'd been, how isolated she felt, how emotionally neglected she'd been for years. Funny how she only found those words after getting caught. She mentioned therapy. She mentioned working on us. She ended the email with, "I'm not proud of what I did, but I still believe we can fix this." I closed the laptop and left it on the bed. I didn't feel rage anymore, just exhaustion, like someone who'd finally gotten out of a burning building only to realize the smoke had been in his lungs for years. I drove back to the house that afternoon, not to talk, not to argue, just to collect the last pieces of myself before she could twist them into another chapter of her victim story. I walked in with a duffel bag and a list in my head: documents, passport, a couple of books I refused to leave behind, and the wooden box in the closet that still held our wedding keepsakes. I didn't want the memories, but I wanted to be the one to decide what burned. She wasn't home when I got there. I don't know if she planned it that way or if it was just luck. Either way, I moved quickly, room by room, drawer by drawer. I didn't stop to stare at photos or smell old clothes. I was in and out like a ghost. But when I got to the bedroom closet, something stopped me cold. A suitcase. Not mine. Hers. Half-packed. Tickets on the nightstand, one-way, Phoenix. I looked closer. The departure date? The day before her birthday party. She was planning to leave. Before the confrontation. Before the cake. Before I said anything. The party wasn't a celebration, it was a farewell tour. I wasn't supposed to be angry. I was supposed to be blindsided. Left behind like the wilted balloons now drooping in the corner of the living room. That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. All the doubts, all the what-ifs, all the times I'd wondered if maybe I was overreacting gone. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had scheduled it. I grabbed my things and walked out. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a reply to her email. But I did leave something. Before I shut the door behind me, I placed one of the flash drives in the middle of the kitchen island. Right beside it, I left a folded sticky note. No explanations. No insults. Just one line. You had a chance to tell the truth. Now I'll let it speak for itself. That night, I didn't go back to the motel. I checked into a small Airbnb by the lake. Quiet. Peaceful. No shared walls or flickering lights. I sat out on the deck with a blanket over my shoulders, staring at the water, trying to remember what life felt like before I learned how well someone could lie to your face and still kiss you goodnight. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it ring, then buzzed again, voicemail. I listened this time. It's Miles. I didn't move. I don't know what she told you, man, but it wasn't serious. It just got out of hand. I swear, I didn't mean to. I hung up before he could finish. I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. And besides, what kind of man calls the husband 3 days later to explain the affair like it was a misunderstanding over a parking ticket? This wasn't about Callie anymore. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself I'd handed over too easily. 3 days after I walked out of the house for good, I started receiving messages that felt off. Not desperate, not angry, strategic. Like she was trying on different emotional masks to see which one might still work on me. First, it was the "I'm broken" messages. Then the "I don't recognize myself" voice notes. Then the guilt trips, telling me how her mother was disappointed, how her sister had taken my side, how everyone was making her out to be the villain. That part made me laugh. I hadn't told a soul outside my brother and my lawyer. If people were turning against her, it wasn't because of anything I said. It was because the truth had a stench, and it was finally leaking through her perfume and polite smiles. But then the messages shifted again. This time she tried nostalgia. She sent a photo of us at the lake house from 5 years ago, the one we rented before everything began to decay. "Remember this?" she wrote beneath it. "You made pancakes that burned and we still ate them." Yeah, I remembered. I remembered she picked a fight that night about something I said in front of her friends, then made me sleep on the couch because I embarrassed her. The pancakes were the only good part. Still, her next message is the one that hit different. "Let's just sit down. One last time. If it changes nothing, I'll never bother you again." I didn't answer immediately. I stared at that message for nearly an hour. Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell. Another part of me wanted to hear what lie she'd lead with. But the smallest, dumbest part, the part of me that still remembered how it felt to believe her, just wanted closure. So I agreed. Neutral location. Public one. A coffee shop near downtown we used to go to when we first dated. I arrived early, sat by the window, and waited with my hands wrapped around a paper cup of black coffee that had gone lukewarm in minutes. She walked in like nothing had changed. Hair curled, light makeup, scarf tossed over her shoulder like she was walking into a brunch, not a reckoning. She smiled. I didn't. "Elle," she said, sliding into the seat across from me like this was just another Tuesday. "You look good." I said nothing. She sighed, as if I was the one being difficult. "Look, I didn't come here to beg or argue. I came here because we mattered. You and me. We weren't perfect, but we had something real." "You mean before or after you started screwing miles in hotel rooms labeled as staff retreats?" She flinched. "I deserve that. I know I do. But can we not do the insults? Please?" I leaned forward. "You invited him to your birthday party. You stood in a room full of our friends while he whispered things in your ear that used to belong to me. And you smiled like it was some secret joke. So forgive me if I'm not in the mood to act civilized." She bit her lip and looked down. "I panicked," she said, "when you called it out. I didn't expect it. I thought maybe you didn't know." "And if I didn't?" Her eyes flicked up. "I don't know." That was the most honest thing she'd said in months. I sat back. "You weren't planning to fix this, Callie. You were planning to leave. The plane ticket, the suitcase. You were going to walk away without even offering me the dignity of the truth." She said nothing. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. "There won't be a reconciliation. There won't be a second chance. There won't be therapy or finding our way back to each other. There will be a divorce. It will be quiet, clean, and fast. And when people ask what happened, I'll say, we grew apart. Because unlike you, I still know how to keep private things private." Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to reach across the table, but I pulled my hand back before she could touch it. "I'm not the man you thought I was, Callie," I said. "You broke the version of me that would have crawled back. What you're looking at now is the man you created when you decided I wasn't enough." She wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "Do you hate me?" I paused, considered it. "No," I said. "I just don't trust myself around you anymore." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Then I guess this is it. I stood up, slid my phone into my coat pocket, and left without another word. This wasn't closure. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a release, one she never expected me to take. The next 48 hours moved like a slow avalanche. I didn't check in with her after that meeting. I didn't respond when she sent a follow-up text that said, "I understand. I'll respect your space." Respect. That word burned in my chest. If she had even a thread of respect left for me, we wouldn't be here. But I didn't reply. I had done what I came to do. The door was closed. And then came the part no one warns you about, the silence after the storm. You expect to feel relief or maybe pride. But what you feel is hollowness. Not because you want them back, but because you spent so long trying to keep something alive that was already dead. And now that it's buried, you don't know what to do with your own hands. I wandered through each hour like I'd misplaced something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. Then my lawyer called. "Elwood, we have a situation," he said flatly. I was sitting outside the Airbnb, sipping bitter coffee again, trying to read a book I couldn't focus on. "She's lawyered up," he continued, "and she's contesting the prenup." I actually laughed out loud. "On what grounds?" "Emotional manipulation. She's claiming you coerced her into signing it under stress." I had to hold the phone away from my ear and stare at it for a second, just to process the level of audacity. "She signed it in front of a notary," I said. "She was the one who suggested it. Said it made her feel safe since I made more money." My lawyer sighed. "It's weak, but she's throwing spaghetti at the wall, probably hoping you'll panic and offer a payout to make it go away." The old version of me, the one that bent over backward to keep her from feeling uncomfortable, might have done that. But that man was gone. That man had sat at his wife's birthday party while her lover stood 2 feet away. "I'm not giving her a cent more than what's in the agreement," I said. "Let her keep throwing." "She also requested to delay the process for emotional health reasons," he added. I leaned forward in my chair. "She wants to stretch this out and wear me down." "Looks like it." I smiled without warmth. "Good. Let's see who breaks first." When I hung up, I felt it, the shift. That quiet, seismic shift that told me I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was leading. She thought she could paint herself as the fragile party, the woman betrayed by a cold husband who just snapped. But she underestimated how dangerous a quiet man becomes when he's spent years being dismissed. And then, just like clockwork, the social manipulation began. It started with a vague post on her social media. A picture of her holding a cup of tea, captioned, "Some people break you. Some people free you. Healing begins with truth." The comments poured in. Sympathy. Heart emojis. "You're so strong." "He doesn't deserve you." She hadn't said my name, of course, but she didn't need to. She was planting seeds, setting the stage, making sure when the truth came out, it was drowned in enough noise to confuse the audience. But she forgot one thing. I didn't burn the flash drive. In fact, I had something else she didn't know about. A recording from that night after the party when she called Miles in a panic. She hadn't realized the Bluetooth was still connected to my spare phone upstairs. The whole call was recorded. Her admitting she was in too deep, that she never expected Elwood to actually find out, that she just wanted to get through the party and disappear after the trip. I saved it. Not for revenge. Not for public drama. But for truth. For insurance. So when her lawyer tried to play the sympathy card, when he said, "Callie is in therapy, trying to process the emotional trauma of this breakup," my lawyer simply emailed him the transcript of the call and offered to share the audio if needed. No reply. 2 days later, her side backed off the prenup. Suddenly, the delay requests stopped. It was like watching a puppet show where the strings were finally yanked too hard. That night, I walked along the lake behind the Airbnb. I thought about the version of myself I used to be. The man who stayed up late planning anniversaries she forgot, who canceled work trips to help her chase new hobbies she'd abandoned in a month. That man would have cried over all of this. But me, I just watched the water ripple under the moonlight and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Clean. Quiet. efficient, just like I promised. No courtroom drama. No dragged-out proceedings. No last-minute tears or dramatic objections. She signed the documents in silence, wearing the same kind of polite, detached expression she used to wear at dinner when I talked about my day. But this time, I was the one who got to leave first. I didn't even look back when I walked out of that office. And that silence felt like justice. In the weeks that followed, I didn't spiral. I didn't go on a dating spree or drown in bitter rants. I just rebuilt. Slowly. Intentionally. I rented a quiet apartment with a view of the river. I started cooking again, not for someone else's approval, but because I remembered I actually enjoyed it. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. Turns out they'd noticed things too. They just didn't know how to tell me. One night, I ran into a neighbor at the local bookstore. The kind of guy who barely said more than hi in passing for years. He looked at me, then said, "You look lighter." I told him it was the haircut, but we both knew better. And Callie? She faded. There were rumors she moved out of town. Some said she got a new job. Others claimed she went on some self-discovery retreat. I didn't care. She could rewrite the story however she wanted. But the truth? The truth was still sitting quietly on a hard drive in a drawer I no longer needed to open. One day, while sorting through old boxes, I found our wedding photo tucked between old receipts and a cracked candle holder. I almost threw it away, but instead I kept it, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of who I was, what I survived, and how I refused to become bitter when I had every reason to. Because here's what I've learned. Closure doesn't come with an apology. It comes when you stop asking for one. So no, this story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with peace, with freedom, with a quiet kind of victory, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. Thank you for following this story through every twist, betrayal, and quiet comeback. I hope it reminded you that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away without setting fire to the bridge. Just let it rot behind you. This was my story, one of many. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's one historical event that changed everything for you, or that you find incredibly fascinating? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where every story matters, especially yours.